Handsome Hockey Podcast. 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 Handsome Hockey Podcast.
Handsome Hockey Podcast. Hi, friends.
Hello. We didn't do an introduction last time.
Yeah, we did.
It was not happy.
Well, I mean, what we were talking about was fucking miserable.
That's true. That's true.
This episode, however.
But we didn't introduce ourselves last time.
Oh. Hi, I'm Jake.
Hi, I'm Evan. Evan!
Now you're just toying with my emotions. Welcome to episode 48 of the Handsome Hockey Podcast, folks. We are elated to be talking about happy things.
Yeah, the reason that I brought that back is because we're going to talk about the Connecticut Whale.
Now you're just stealing my shit. You're a fucking podcasting grifter, and I don't appreciate it.
You temporarily had emphysema. I needed to do it.
Okay, fine. So today we are talking about the the PHF season 7 preview. For those of you who don't know, and we'll get into this more in depth here in a little bit, the PHF, the Premier Hockey Federation, is the new iteration of the NWHL, the National Women's Hockey League. And they did a bit of a name change this season. We'll get into that a little bit later. But
bit of a switcheroo.
A bit of a rebrand. I don't know which is worse, PHF or Meta. I think I'm going to go with Meta.
Meta is definitely worse.
Yeah.
When you take the fucking Auntie Annie's pretzel logo and like roll it out as, a tech company. Like
you also roll out pretzels. So, however... We're here to talk about hockey, in particular the Premier Hockey Federation, which is the preeminent women's hockey league in North America. And their season starts this Saturday, November 6th. We will hopefully have this episode edited before then.
I mean, right now your rate is at like having it edited by the time I go to bed. So...
No, that will not happen because I will be going to bed.
No, that was just a compliment. You have been so efficient at getting episodes out for our tiny little backwater operation. Like, you deserve a public commendation.
I deserve a raise too. $0.
Yeah, we'll see about that.
My title as co-host is now co-host. So before we dive into this PHF preview, it's really important that we state out of the gate, we are absolutely not either women's hockey or PHF experts. While our knowledge has grown exponentially since we started this podcast, like roughly a year ago today, we're still learning the culture, the history, the personalities that make the PHF such an indispensable part of the hockey landscape.
You were going to say penalties, and I maintain that the penalties are still the same. That's convenient.
That's very true. Yeah, penalties do stay the same. So since we are not experts in this field, it's really important to us. We're not experts in the NHL either, but we can fake it a little bit more. So
we listen to enough other podcasts.
Yes, for this preview of the PHF season 7, it's really important to us that we acknowledge our sources and the great work that other people do in order to bring this coverage. And really just, if you listen to us, you should be reading them and listening to them and whatever, because they're great. Yeah. So the first one, everyone at the Ice Garden, theicegarden.com. It's SB Nation's women's hockey flagship blog. They have incredible collection of writers. Mike McCarthy, Cy Morley, Dan Rice, Ant Darkarski, Angelica Rodriguez, amongst many others that do a brilliant job over there. They cover the PHF, the PWHPA, women's college hockey. They have their fingers on the pulse of everything that is professional and collegiate women's hockey. And this preview does nothing without their work. And so thank you to them.
Yeah, I love Ant Darkarski especially because she is attending my alma mater, University of Illinois, and does a great job with sort of Illinois sports, Illinois hockey stuff, talking about Illinois women's hockey. It's hard to have fun in Champaign-Urbana, so shout out to her.
Yeah, look for all of them on Twitter. They're all there. Give them a follow, give them likes, but also check out the icegarden.com. It's a really incredibly well-run and a great resource for women's hockey in general. Also, the team at Victory Press, that's victorypress.org. They're an independent publication, so not affiliated with like SB Nation like the Ice Garden is. They focus a lot on gender and social issues in sports, and they particularly emphasize or put their emphasis on women's hockey. So there's a ton of also women's college hockey and PHF and PWHPA work going on there.
Also, they have some excellent web design. Like
They
am every time I go to Victory Press, I'm just enamored with how much I love their web layout.
But they also have some incredible writers. Melissa Burgess is indispensable to the women's hockey beat. Her Twitter feed is an absolute must follow if you care about women's hockey at all. Andrew, another one of their writers, did a brilliant piece on the PHF trans inclusionary policy that we will get to a little bit later. It also a must read. It's just some brilliant work overall over there at victorypress.org. So give them a shout, donate to them if you have some extra cash laying around, or you just cleaned out your couch cushions and took it to a Coinstar or something. Use that money to donate to them. They are independent and they are an incredible resource. And then finally, and absolutely not least, maybe even most of all, DF Pendrys. Follow them and their work at DF Pendrys. That's DFPENDRYS on Twitter. They have been covering not only the PHF, but also college women's hockey and gymnastics and volleyball and all these other sports.
How do you cover that much sports? I'm so impressed.
If you go to their YouTube channel,
which is Glive Sports, GLAIVE,
it's unreal.
Yeah. It's amazing.
So much content on this, and you'll be there for hours. And so we apologize ahead of time for being your window into that YouTube rabbit hole. But DF does incredible work. They had an interview with Digit Murphy and Joanna Boynton of the Toronto Six maybe a month ago.
That was so good.
It was intense and perfect and wonderful, and really asked some hard-hitting questions of some people who deserve to have hard-hitting questions asked of them after Digit Murphy's summer of putting their name on a trans exclusionary policy and work group. Check out all of their stuff. DF is incredible, and we really want to give them a special shout out because they have been one of the most helpful folks out there for us, both in reaching a wider audience, but much more importantly around helping us become a better inclusive podcast.
Yeah. Kind of coaching us and saying, hey, you guys, said something a little bit off color there. You can do better next time. And we've been trying and continued to. So, it's been a huge help. Every contact we've had from them, and every time they put out an episode of ours, it makes me so happy.
Yeah. Knowing that DF cares enough to put out a tweet about our episodes is one of the most heartwarming aspects of doing this podcast, because they do an incredible job and we respect the hell out of them. So thank you, DF, for your support and taking the time with two guys who don't have all of it figured out yet, but are really trying, and for being really patient with us. We cannot thank you enough. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Amen to that.
So with the acknowledgements done, this was one hell of an off season.
Yeah, they definitely had a eventful off season. The name change is just kind of the beginning of how much happened this offseason.
Yeah, when the offseason started, the PHF didn't exist, but boy howdy, here it is.
Yeah, and we've gotten into it in previous episodes kind of about the name change. It seemed a little arbitrary, but we're supportive of the league, and so we're going to be supportive of the name change. But they ditched the National Women's Hockey League, NWHL, to form the PHF, the Premier Hockey Federation. And jokes aside, that happened.
There are many jokes to be made, I think, about this name change. But
a lot of them we already made.
Yes. But we have an episode where we talk about failed name changes, and the PHF is definitely in there. If you do a hashtag PHF on Twitter, you will find one Premier Hockey Federation reference and 40 others that have absolutely nothing to do with the PHF. So there's some branding missteps and whatnot. One positive outcome, though, is that they truly removed gender from the name of the league, and that works in two ways. One is, the NHL doesn't have National Men's Hockey League in it, right?
No,
and so why should the National Women's Hockey League have to have that moniker as well? This
very valid point.
This is a further celebration of their athletes, and not as women athletes, but as athletes. And I think that's really important. And the second thing that this really does is that it's a first step towards kind of removing gender from the league. And that allows the league to become a more inclusive environment for trans athletes, non-binary athletes, in theory. We'll get to that. That's called foreshadowing, folks.
Look at that English degree working.
And so this allows for the league to, set the framework or the groundwork for becoming a more inclusive league, which was super important for a league that had a lot of missteps towards inclusivity this summer. Most notably, Digit Murphy, who is the president and former head coach of the Toronto Six, put their name on a very trans exclusionary policy from the Women's Sports Policy Working Group.
And was revealed to be working on that turf working group.
Removing gender from the name of the league did kind of alleviate some of these issues.
They sort of did it before also then releasing the new trans inclusion policy, and that kind of opened them up to more criticism that they maybe were due.
Yeah.
If they had released the name change and the policy together, I think this whole thing would have made a whole lot more sense.
Yes. It was let's say ham-fisted a little bit,
but also they're a small league. They're scrappy. I can understand how, this thing goes. I've been working on new jerseys for our team for all season. I can't only imagine trying to run a whole league.
Yeah, I can't either. Especially one where it feels like the fan base falls into polemic dispute all the time.
Yeah, you have a lot of very diverse opinions that kind of need to be pleased and are easily kind of displeased for very valid reasons. So yeah, I don't envy their position, and that leads me to be more understanding of the sort of name change.
For sure. So the name change is the first step of their off-season strategy, I guess, of rebranding and refocusing their efforts. The second and much more significant step was the PHF released a new transgender inclusion policy for athletes in the league. This was a very substantive step forward, and we're going to tackle the problematic language in this, probably way more in depth, definitely way more in depth than we are the positive language in it. However, it needs to be addressed that there are some positive steps here. The first being the previous iteration of their transgender athlete policy it really,
It was pretty stark.
it was stark, and it othered people really harshly.
Yeah.
And while you're automatically othering people by having a policy to begin with, that specifically talks about those people who you're othering, you can go about it in softer, more positive, more inclusive ways.
Yeah. Figuring out how to include trans people in women's sports is one of the most difficult propositions in sports these days, and in, better integrating trans people with sporting opportunities and public at large.
Yeah, it's difficult mostly because people are dumb.
Right. If chodes on the internet are going to be anti-trans, they are going to go directly to women's sports and make their noise there. Like, that's how it works all the time.
I appreciate your usage of the word chodes. That was like a very 7th grade word, but I it made me nostalgic. So the first really good step that this policy has is that it removes arbitrary hormone levels as a safeguard against, what the league determines is somebody who is able to participate. Hormone levels, as has been scientifically proven over and over again, are really arbitrary determiners for who is and isn't a quote unquote a woman or whatever.
Right.
This hormone levels are different for people across all genders. And
right.
So from one person that identifies in that gender to another.
It was kind of a mistake to ever be policing hormone levels in the first place.
Yeah, you're creating a threshold that is arbitrary, and it's based on little to no actual science, and you're using that threshold as an exclusionary device rather than creating something that is open and obvious and welcoming.
Yeah, for maybe to make it more clear, there are very feminine people that naturally have very high testosterone levels. Like, this was a easy to settle on metric that turned out to be fairly incorrect.
The second thing that the new policy does is it specifically includes trans men and non-binary athletes who were assigned male at birth, which is a significant step in that it's much more broad and inclusive and addresses folks on the gender spectrum who had not ever really been addressed in policy in a quote unquote women's sports league before, which is really outstanding to see. The fact that it very directly addresses these groups is a giant step forward, I think. And while, again, and as we'll get into here in a moment, not perfect, it is a step forward. The PHF policy is a really big step forward and is far more inclusive than many of the other women's professional sports leagues throughout North America. And so I think the PHF should be given credit where credit is due for making that leap and making an actual attempt at something that is more inclusionary.
Yeah.
The league also lays out a plan of a course of action for folks who are in the league currently but may want to come out, and that is also extremely helpful, I think. Giving people a window of opportunity where they may not have had one in the past it's great, and I think again this is a big step forward. There's also some really kind of troubling aspects of it.
Yeah, it's not without problems.
Right. This isn't the biggest issue, but maybe is the root of all the other issues, is that no trans women seem to have actually been consulted when crafting this policy. The PHF was asked about this and declined to answer. The PHF proudly spoke about how they included Athlete Ally and Chris Mosier, who is a famous trans athlete. that were part of the team that crafted this policy.
But Chris Mosier is a trans man.
And Athlete Ally is run and operated by a cisgendered man.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but that is problematic.
Yeah, we understand, being a cisgendered man and fully supportive of trans athletes. But if I was put in the position to craft this policy, I would definitely defer to a lot of trans women.
I would immediately abdicate that position. Yeah.
I mean, abdicate or not, like, bring the voices that need to be heard into the fold.
Crafting a policy that directly affects trans women's ability to play a sport, but not checking with them with regards to the inclusion or efficacy of those proposed changes is really problematic.
Yeah.
At worst, this reflects kind of the league's lack of actual progress with regards to trans and non-binary inclusivity. At best, this new policy is kind of like a show pony for its progressive rhetoric, with no actual progressive teeth behind it.
It's sort of like the women that Stan Bowman trotted out at the draft to say, hey, look, the Chicago Blackhawks hire women.
That was one of the most cringeworthy moments in the last year of
Yeah,
hockey.
this is definitely better than that, but, on the same lines.
From an actual policy level, though, the policy sets a requirement of living in your identity for 2 years for trans men and non-binary athletes who are assigned male at birth. And you have to be able to show that you had quote unquote lived in your identity for 2 years. And this is problematic for a number of reasons, but the two major ones that jump out are the guiding principles of the new policy state, quote unquote, that the PHF respects all backgrounds, experiences, and identities and assumes from the outset that athletes who compete under these rules are doing so to play hockey as who they truly are, not to gain a competitive advantage. One, why do you even have to fucking say that? And
then
two,
they go Ronald Reagan and say, trust but verify.
Yeah. Two, if the PHF truly believes this, then why is there a 2-year waiting period for transgender men and non-binary folks who are assigned male at birth? You're very strongly stating that we don't think people are coming here with to gain a competitive advantage, but then saying, actually, we think you're here to gain a competitive advantage. There's little to no explanation for why the PHF would ostracize and place further qualifications on groups of people other than the fact that they feel that these athletes would be participating with a competitive advantage, which, this has been proven time and time again to be a false flag that, Republicans and conservative blowhards bring up when they're trying to, prevent trans women from playing in sports. And every time it comes up, it's proven to be bullshit and just fear mongering. The PHF especially should be doing a better job to include folks, and enforcing a waiting period on them just doesn't do that.
That also seems especially long. We make, athletes who transfer colleges sit out, a year? That's maybe far more palatable than 2 years.
The Victory Press article actually goes in depth on this and talks about how 1 year is actually kind of the mandatory, or not mandatory, but kind of the benchmark in the past. And so this is actually double the time that most leagues require people to kind of wait to participate.
They're making double sure. It's like they're wearing 2 condoms.
Well, it's like the PHF, before they wrote this policy, they had all these good ideas. And then unfortunately they watched Joanna Man. And it turns out that movie is not based on actual events whatsoever, and is actually a terrible movie.
I think that was assumed from the outset that it was cinematographically horrible.
Yeah.
But it's also a very awful false flag for trans people.
Yeah, I hope that movie ruined the careers of everybody involved in it. There are people whose lives are actually being ruined by what is effectively an arbitrary timeline. The second big issue with this is that this policy, and this goes with it being an arbitrary timeline, is that the policy in no way states what is the actual start of that 2-year wait period. It doesn't talk about having a conversation with a therapist or talking with a doctor or coming out to your friends or coming out to your parents. Like, there's no actual framework set for what is the start of that 2-year timeline. And what this does is it allows the league to kind of move those goalposts. It gives them the elasticity in this policy to say, oh, well, you only actually came out to the league 6 weeks ago, so that's actually the start of your living in your identity, whereas opposed to this person who came at, like, it creates double standards, and it creates this like vague gray area as to what is considered you living within your identity. And it also makes the league the arbiter of what constitutes living in your identity. And for people who have been othered their entire lives, this segregates even the people who have been othered into further otheredness. Like, this like puts people from further from, like, from
Inclusion.
center, who have been dealing with that their entire lives. The league is simultaneously saying this is when you began living your identity, while also saying you have to prove that you've been living in your identity. It feels extremely disingenuous, and it feels like this is actually going to prevent folks who might have otherwise applied to play in the PHF and been accepted. It'll prevent them from actually applying because of that fear of rejection that now hangs over this process.
Yeah, it sort of seems like it is cut that way, in that it's kind of exclusive to new and prospective players, but inclusive of people that we're also already used to having around and are already part of the community. Also, if you go down the Juana Man Wikipedia rabbit hole,
Oh God.
holy fucking shit. That is a Wikipedia article that I didn't
read that before, and now I have to after we're done recording today.
Yeah, you should. I'm sorry.
This is one of the byproducts of us sitting on our computers while we record. We have access to things.
The internet is an amazing place.
And
turns out.
the worst place. The vagueness of the language allows for folks who do submit themselves for admission to the league to be termed, quote unquote, not trans enough when they are told that they have not met eligibility requirements. And, for a segment of the population, as we were saying earlier, who has been othered the entirety of their lives, this is adding an unnecessarily traumatic event to their lives.
Yeah, indeed. Like, how can you be not trans enough? Like,
right. That a person can make a life-altering proclamation to come out as transgender or non-binary and then be told by the PHF that this is not good enough, that's really fucking exclusionary and does not create a welcoming environment for these communities.
Yeah, I fully agree.
Ultimately, this policy is a step in the right direction, and we don't want to only talk about the negativity because it is a step in the right direction. However, there are some really negative aspects to it. Both the Victory Press and Ice Garden articles about the new policy state that this is still a policy by cis gatekeepers for cis gatekeepers that appears to be progressive, but ultimately still creates unnecessary barriers for participation and attempts to appease the trans parts or the anti-trans parts of the PHF fan base, while also being quote unquote more inclusive of athletes across a broad spectrum of gendered identities.
Right. We're talking about, appearance and not action.
Eventually, you can't kowtow to both of these sides. Mm-hmm. You either are going to include people who legitimately want to be included in your league and participate in your league, or you have to just kind of say, we're just going to go with the anti-trans folks here, and like that's going to be our inclusivity. And because you can't play both sides. Eventually, you end up alienating both, and then you have no fans.
Yeah, the classic fence sitter problem.
Yeah, especially for a league like the PHF that has kind of couched itself in this progressive language throughout its entirety, the entirety of its existence. If you sit on that fence, you end up just destroying your feasibility and your reliability with all of your fan base.
And maybe your pants too, because sitting on a fence is bad for pants.
Super painful, yeah. I lost many a pant leg in my day from fences.
I'm, from the home of barbed wire, so imagine how bad the pants were in barbed wire land.
They would probably be very trendy now, actually. You can't have both, unfortunately. If you want a progressive league that is inclusive of athletes across a broad spectrum of gendered identities, you're going to jettison some of the fans who simply cannot and will not allow for the idea that there are more than two genders and that all of them, save, cisgendered men, deserve the right to participate in the PHF. Those are the type of fans that I think the PHF and all leagues need to learn to live without.
And it's probably a fairly small minority.
Let's hope. They're very vocal and they vote in Virginia. So the PHF is at some point going to have to kind of draw a line in the sand and say either we are an inclusive league or we kowtow to this small but vocal segment of the fan base who is like, how do I explain this to my kids? Like, blah, blah, blah. You give them a fucking book. That's how. But
we recognize that it's a process, this is it is a step in the right direction. It's got some problems, but hopefully it is a step in the right direction. Like, hopefully there is a next step to follow this that does a better job than this. Solve some of the problems that have been presented here. That's what we're hoping for.
Yeah. And with that said, we want to end our storylines segment on an extremely positive note.
Yeah, this is such a huge move.
It's if I can be frank, fucking awesome. As much as I love Twitch, this is a little easier to access. What we're talking about is the PHF has signed for the upcoming 2021-2022 season an exclusive North American or American streaming deal with ESPN Plus.
Huge.
It's say what you want about ESPN. Yeah, it's kind of trashy, but it's also the #1 sports authority in the United States.
Mm-hmm. And they've brought in hockey in the NHL in the offseason. And they've gone so far as to bring in women's hockey now too. That's a great move in that, these two developments happened almost in concert with each other. And it kind of feels like, okay, ESPN is now into hockey. And it's across the board. ESPN Plus showing the NHL games has not gotten me to come over from cracked streams yet, but showing the PHF definitely will bring me over. I will be a paying ESPN member by Saturday.
It increases the visibility on such a dramatic level of the PHF. All 60 regular season games and the playoffs are going to be streamed on ESPN Plus. We saw an increase in visibility last year with the Twitch streaming of games and the NBC Sports, the dearly departed NBC Sports, showing.
Is it dearly?
No, fuck them. But they showed the Isabel Cup semifinals and finals live.
Okay, yeah, they did that.
It's an entirely different level from that. ESPN is the #1. I'm going to keep saying this probably for the next 2 to 3 minutes, but they are the #1 sports authority in the United States, hands down. It's not even close. And they are showing every single PHF game this season.
The sports equipment, sports authority business might have a problem with.
They are the Dick's Sporting Goods of sports on TV.
But yeah, it's awesome to see this get picked up by ESPN Plus. I hope that all of this army of writers that they've hired and kind of personalities that they've hired also adopts PHF and women's hockey just as heartily as their parent company has. I mean, I would love to see Greg Wyshynski and Puck Soup talk women's hockey and how awesome Lavisa Sealander is and talk about Mallory Suliotis' cats. Like, that would be dope.
They are great cats.
Hell yeah.
ESPN Plus, like, for those who didn't know, and we haven't really talked about this at all, I think, on the podcast, they show a ton of college hockey, including women's college hockey. So they have a ton of hockey content already that you would not find anywhere else. Like, I was on there the other day and it was like Cornell versus Brown in women's hockey, and I was like, yeah, I'll fucking watch that. Like,
and then you tune in and it's like, oh, Butchergrass, what are you doing here?
Yeah, exactly. This is a huge deal for the Premier Hockey Federation. It's great because those of us like Evan and I who like last season arbitrarily chose teams and were like, I'm going to watch the Twitch streams of those while they're in the wubble. God, I miss saying that.
I know. I will
wubble.
forever miss the wubble.
I think nobody else will actually miss the wubble, but we will miss the wubble.
No, from all accounts, the wubble was awful.
Yeah.
Everybody got
suffering. COVID. COVID ran roughshod through that thing. But this not only increases access to people who are already fans of the game and of the sport, it also allows people who are like diving into the sport for the first time and are like, let's be honest, the Connecticut Whale logo is fucking awesome. And so like they see that logo and they're like, that's really cool. What is that? And they're like, oh, I'll click on this game. Oh, it's women's hockey. And then they like, just like for whatever reason, fall in love or on the very minute scale are intrigued about it enough to watch another game. They're like, I like the team with the whale logo. Where do I find their next game? Oh, also here on ESPN Plus. It's all right here. And I already have access to this.
Yeah, it does a lot for sort of casual fans of sport.
Yeah.
And hopefully it grows the game. I mean, this is exactly the kind of break that we've been hoping for the PHF.
Absolutely. And, it increases buy-in, it increases viewership, and it just increases the ability for people to fall in love with something that is, I think, inherently easy to fall in love with. Also difficult, but also inherently easy because the games are just fucking fun.
One thing I wish that, I don't know, they could replicate from the Twitch streams though would be like the chat function. Or if you could just get a localized Twitter feed of all of these games, PHF women's hockey Twitter is great and really, I don't know, I think amplifies interest and understanding in the games. And so, if ESPN could find a way to sort of tie in some social media stuff, I think that would even help the audience grow.
It's a huge step forward for the PHF. Hopefully it creates a much more sustainable landscape for the league moving forward, which, the more sustainable the league becomes, the more you can pay players. And really that's the real loggerheads between the PWHPA and the PHF is that in the PHF, theoretically, you can't make enough to make a living. And that's what the PWHPA wants and is advocating for.
Right. And they're sort of following in the footsteps of the NWSL, which, even this season is still figuring out how to make people sort of middle class paid playing a professional sport.
Hopefully this sort of visibility, this sort of sponsorship, this sort of recognition moves that ball forward. We saw the PHF change their salary cap from 150K to 300K this year. You're still not paying people enough to make a living, but it is a step in the right direction. And hopefully this offseason was step one in increasing that salary cap the next year and the next year and the next year until we finally see a league that pays its athletes enough to actually make a living. And with that, we can actually get into our preview of the season.
Season preview.
Now that we've gotten the extracurriculars out of the way, the off-season madness, we just thought there's only 6 teams in the league. How about we just preview the teams? We're going to go alphabetically here because we don't want to show, our true colors at how much the Connecticut Whale are better than everyone.
But we're not very bright, so Toronto is going first. No, I'm just kidding.
Alphabetically first are the reigning champs, the Boston Pride.
We could have just gone by standings, too.
Also very applicable. Judging by Boston's offseason, the defending champs seem really fucking determined to keep their place in the standings and, you know, become the first repeat champs.
Yeah, they've won a couple, but never back to back.
Right. So Boston managed to keep most of their core together. Jillian Dempsey, Kaylee Fratkin, Mallory Suliotis, Christina Patinga, Lavisa Sealander, and Sammy Davis are all coming back this season.
Most importantly, I think keeping the goalie in Lavisa Sealander, because she keeps them in every game.
They also pulled some fucking coups in the offseason.
I mean, isn't that the story in small hockey leagues, is the rich get richer?
It's the story in our fucking league. So yeah. Sorry. Sorry.
No, I mean, I kind of...
open wound, pouring salt. Sorry.
Well, you know, sometimes I identify with the PHF, and you know, when like you see this roster turnover and like really good players want to go play for the dominant teams, like, I don't know. I guess it's all sports. Alabama football, like whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So speaking of really good players wanting to play for the dominant team, Kayla Friesen and Caitlin Russ from the Connecticut Whale. These fuckers. No, I'm just
Turncoats.
Turncoats. How dare you turn your back on the Whale? How dare you turn your back on the pod? Anyways, so they went from Connecticut to Boston. Maybe even bigger, Amanda Boulier from Minnesota. That's a huge swipe, especially coming from your main competition for the last 2 years. Amanda is going to add a ton of like firepower and depth to an already ridiculously stacked lineup on the back end. A aggressive, puck moving, offensive defender who will join Kaylee Fratkin, and they'll probably both challenge each other for the most points from defensemen in the league this year.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Mallory Suliotis still there and still very good. Like that defensive core is something impressive. And they're also adding former standout goalie from the PWHPA, Katie Burt, which is, you know, one of the more interesting stories because one of the few players to kind of cross the PWHPA to PHF gap lately.
I mean, you used to see it frequently. A lot of the players who are in the PWHPA are former NWHLers.
Spend some time there.
Yeah. I mean, Amanda Kessel, Kendall Coyne-Schofield, like these players all played, if not one, multiple seasons in the NWHL before.
Further reinforcing that the rift between these two leagues is purely administrative.
So Katie Burt coming to Boston, a team that already had two very good goaltenders, and adding another very good goaltender to it is what the kids would call fucking ridiculous. Boston was not without their losses. Teresa Vanasova went back to Europe, and
she's my favorite.
Evan's favorite player is gone. He'll have to find a new favorite player.
And you know what? I will.
Yes, he will. Lexi Lang also is no longer in Boston, which does a big hit on their depth down the middle. So they're gonna have to find some real center reinforcements here. But let's be honest, if you're looking for a favorite to win the Isabel Cup, if you're a new fan to the PHF and you're like, I want to go with a winner, Boston's probably your team.
Yeah, that's for sure. You know, great team, great logo. One of the independent franchises in the league. Like, even as the outset, you know, favorite, they're still very, very rootable for it. They're not the Patriots.
Yeah, of all the teams you could root for in the Boston area, the Pride are definitely the best one. Next up is the Buffalo Buttes, who are probably from the city in the NWHL that we would most like to visit. And if I legit, like, before we go in on the Buffalo Buttes, I legit had a dream, like a real full on dream, that you and I did a live show from a bar in Buffalo and Carly Jackson was our special guest.
Wow. Let's just fucking make it happen.
It was fucking awesome.
Let's bring Rob as like a equipment grip.
Is that a DJ?
Yeah, and then like let's all go like watch people go insane at a Bills game and watch the Sabres maybe win.
I woke up. Well, they've been doing a lot of that.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like the Buffalo Renaissance is back on.
I woke up that morning and was like, we must take this podcast to the next level.
We must go to
We must interview Carly Jackson.
we must go to Buffalo.
Yes. Let's go.
I love it.
So the Buffalo Buttes, they had a rough go last year in the Hubble. They were, I think, 1-4-1 overall. Couldn't score any goals.
They were competitive in a lot of those games,
yes.
but dropped a lot of them.
Played very good defense and had stellar goaltending by the aforementioned Carly Jackson. They brought back Mary Jo Pelletier to be one of the cornerstones of their defense, along with Elena Orlando, who retired and then from the Connecticut Whale and then unretired to become a Buffalo Butte, which is not at all something I'm pissed about.
The classic Jordan move.
Go Pod. So the Buttes had a massive roster overturn this year. Nate Oliver is their GM, and they went full like.
I think we've gotten into this before. Balls to the wall is not about testicles. It's a
It's a dodgeball reference.
no.
I know.
it's a reference to fucking steam engines and ball bearings in a like part of the what do you call that? The accelerator? I don't the lever that.
Yes.
So it's like literally like pushing it to the barrier. I don't know. It sounds gendered, but it's not. That's why it's super funny.
It's like that "Push It to the Limit" song from like GTA 4 that you hear 4,000 times as you're driving really fast across the city.
As opposed to push it real good.
Push it real, yeah. So, anyways,
Where were we?
I have no idea where we were.
We were at balls to the wall.
Oh, yes. So Nate Oliver, GM of the Buttes, decided that their plan of attack was going to be to fill out the roster very quickly and then allow that roster to gel in the offseason.
Which is a very, very smart idea.
Very smart. The very opposite plan of action for my beloved Tottenham Hotspur, who signs people at the very last second and then is like, why don't they incorporate themselves into the team? Why is this so stupid? Why do they suck? It turns out they're good. You just suck. Anyways.
Sidebar. This is a thing that should be more normal. Like, I think that, thinking of athletes as plug and play, like kind of pieces of statistics that go into, a system under a coach, whatever. Like, I think that's a huge failing of American sports understanding right now. Like, athletes are people with emotions and bodies, all of which have needs. Allowing for practice time, like, it sounds so simple, but it's almost like revolutionary in some way. I don't know. A whole lot of people step into like expectations to perform yesterday and to just say, hey, we're going to get this group together quickly and practice. Like, wow, what a thought.
The Buffalo Buttes brought in a ton of new players, 12 new players to round out their roster this year. A lot of those are, PHF veterans, but a lot of them are rookies as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the defense is going to be the absolute calling card, I think, for this season. You have Carly Jackson, who's incredible. You have a solid defensive core, and you're not entirely sure where all your scoring is going to come from. So what do? You lock it down on the back end. And, with all of those new acquisitions, some of which are, incredibly beneficial or should be incredibly beneficial. I'm thinking of like Grace Kleinbach in general, who, will bring a lot of speed and skill to this team, to their forward group, which they desperately need. This is a team that on paper could make a lot of advances, this season compared to where they were last season, which was, unfortunately in the cellar. So
yeah, I think rookies in the PHF can make a huge impact because a lot of them are coming from, really storied college programs. A lot of them are bringing a tendency to win to, this team that could probably use a push. So, I think we'll probably end up seeing a couple of those rookie players be stars or burgeoning stars by the end of the season.
absolutely. Speaking of burgeoning stars, the Connecticut Whale. My pride and joy, the Connecticut Whale. They bring back a lot of their talent. Emma Vlasic of my Jersey fame, Alyssa Wolfeiler, Tori Howren are all back from the Whale. They did lose Kayla Friesen and Elena Orlando. However, they brought in some really incredible additions, and so I'm really excited. They brought former Riveter Kaylee Hutchinson, who will be kind of tasked with replacing some of the firepower lost up front. Kaylee will probably be in the top two lines immediately. Rebecca Morse, also formerly a Riveter, joins to kind of help solidify the back end that lost Elena Orlando. But Rebecca can absolutely add to the attack as well. More of a kind of progressive defender. They're also going to look to their rookie class. Perhaps no team outside of maybe Toronto is looking for more from their rookie class. The Connecticut Whale traded their third round and their first round picks in exchange for the first pick overall. And then they took Taylor Gerard, who had a prolific collegiate career. And then they also took Emma Pulaski from Syracuse in the second round, two forwards who they're going to expect a lot of moving forward. Forwards who they're going to expect a lot of moving forward. I suck at this game. Especially Taylor Gerard is probably looking at Rookie of the Year candidacy. It's easy to say that about the first pick overall, but there's some real dynamism in their game, and it's going to be really awesome to see where they slot into into this Connecticut team.
And former first pick overall, Sammy Davis was like a contributor right out the gate,
right away. Yeah.
So I think that the first pick overall in this league matters a lot.
Yeah. And finally, who I think might be the biggest addition to the Connecticut Whale, Kennedy Marchment is coming over from Sweden. They were a dominant player in Sweden's top league for a number of years, were initially a first round pick, I think in 2017 into the NWHL.
How's this for a nickname? Machine Gun Kennedy?
Good. We'll go with good. Yeah. They poured in points over in Sweden, and there's going to be a lot of expectation on them here in the PHF. But my money says that they meet those expectations, and they have an incredibly strong first year here in the PHF.
Yeah. It turns out playing in Sweden, good for hockey.
Yeah. Yeah. There are a lot of good things hockey related happening in Sweden.
Like everyone that's played in Sweden in the NHL, has done interesting things. So,
especially with the Red Wings.
Right.
So last year, the Whale went from an afterthought. They got absolutely shelled and shellacked in season 5. In season 6 in the Wubble, and they made it to the semifinals and had a very solid and proactive season.
Looked really good.
I think with the additions that they made this year and some increased goaltending, there's a very good chance that Connecticut has a very strong season.
So every league needs an antagonist.
The NHL has the Blackhawks.
This is maybe not as stark or embarrassing, but the Metropolitan Riveters
still kind of bad.
Yeah, had some issues kind of starting in the Wubble, and then lost their most progressive player in Soraya Tinker to Toronto, and seems to sort of have doubled down on the barstooly, turfy land thing.
It's an interesting predicament because they have Madison and Anya Packer. Madison Packer, the captain of the Rivs, and Anya Packer, the GM, who are both seen as kind of a light in the league.
They're both lovely.
And
they're hilarious on Twitter.
Yeah. Oh my God. Their Instagram with their kid is adorable. But they also have Rebecca Russo and Kelly Babstock, who were the two participants in the interview with Erica Nardini that set off the entire firestorm in the Wubble last year, who have yet to speak out, and nobody has ever said anything.
Which revealed some interesting bits in that, like, Erica Nardini was like way closer to buying a franchise.
3 teams.
Than anyone ever let on.
That has never really been kind of atoned for.
Or explained officially.
The fact that Soraya Tinker last year used her platform to come out and say, we don't fucking need Barstool in this league, which set off yet another firestorm.
Yeah, no fancy. She's no longer on that team anymore.
Yeah, surprising.
Also, I ordered a Soraya Tinker Metro Riveters jersey, and they just sent me a blank Metro Riveters jersey.
And
so, I mean,
a size smaller than you ordered too, if I remember correctly.
It was what I ordered, but the sizing was weird.
Let's just say my Connecticut Whale Emma Vlasic jersey is a gem.
Yeah, I might have to get a second jersey.
So a Toronto 6 Soraya Tinker jersey would look great on you. The Riveters, if there is an antagonist in the league, it's definitely the Rivs. Their league issues weren't limited to just like dabbling with Barstool. They also were fined for communicating with a drafted player prior to the opening of free agency, which, to their credit, Anya Packer was like, hey, that's on me. I screwed this up. I take responsibility. I am the GM and I screwed up. And it was a very interesting 2021 for the Rivs. And I think probably the entire team and organization is hoping that the 2021-2022 season is a departure from that, a season where they can not be the antagonist in the league. Let Boston do that.
Let your dominant team be the antagonist.
Yeah, Boston does that.
Don't give people a reason to dislike you.
Yeah. So they're just going to kind of like fade into the background and win some hockey games and, maybe win an Isabel Cup. Their entire draft class this year were defenders. And so they're going to put a lot of emphasis on the blue line this year. And they brought in Brooke Wileczko from formerly of the Connecticut Whale to be to kind of round out their goalies.
Mm-hmm.
It was an interesting season and off season for the Rivs. And here's me saying, hopefully they put that behind them and we can just watch some hockey this year and have a good season.
Yeah. Any antagonism, their direction will be of the healthy sporting kind.
Yes.
But yeah, would we love to see them be less aligned with Barstool and that kind of vein of thought? Absolutely.
Yes. All right, Evan, let's talk about your team.
The Minnesota Whitecaps. Nina Rogers signed on to be an assistant coach at Dartmouth this offseason, which takes a really powerful player out of their ranks. That's going to be a little bit tough to replace. Ali Thunstrom is back, along with Jonna Curtis. Losing Boulier, who we alluded to before, is a huge loss on the back end, and they're going to need to replace that skill and offensive ability somehow. Minnesota just announced on November 2nd that they signed Lexi Lang, one of the better centers in the PHF from Boston, adding a lot of necessary depth and skill to their forwards. As of writing this, Amanda Levier has not re-signed, but it'd be shocking if she wasn't back behind her fish pads for the upcoming season. I mean, like, come on. The fish pads. You can't get rid of the fish. You need a player for your fish pads.
She'll never live it down if she doesn't wear the fish pads this year. Yeah. Minnesota doesn't have a goalie signed, and it's the Wednesday before the season starts. This could be fun.
That's my jersey I want. If I could get fish pads in a jersey, like I just wear goalie pads around.
I'd be jealous
in my regular life. Like that would be pretty cool. So here's to hoping that she re-signs quickly. Indications are and all indications are that she will, but hopefully they don't have to just play with an extra skater.
Or like David Ayers just shows up and is like, don't worry, I'm here.
Yeah, and hopefully she doesn't sort of Tuukka Rask it either.
I honestly think the Whitecaps could take a pretty significant step back this year. They lost a lot of players, and while Jonna Curtis is awesome, and Lexi Lang is awesome and a great addition, and fingers crossed Amanda Levier is on their team again. It feels kind of like they're the team that treaded water the most.
Yeah, it might be
season.
sort of a regression candidate.
Yeah, and not because they got significantly worse. It's just because other teams got better.
Mm-hmm. Which is, this is a bit of an arms race.
Yeah, this is the Bad Boys Pistons. Did they get worse? No, but the Jordan Bulls got better. If Amanda Levier signs and is their goalie, then all bets are off the table because she's incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing what goaltending will do to just let you hang around and finish games and be in games you shouldn't otherwise be
especially in a short season. Mm-hmm. If it's a 82 game season and you have a great goalie, yeah, they might steal like 6, 7, 8, 9 games. And you're like, oh, wow, it's a really good thing that Bobrovsky came back around. In a 20 game season and they steal 6, 7, 8 games. That's huge.
Yeah, that's playoffs or better. Yeah, for sure.
So Amanda Levier coming back may undo everything that we have just said about the Whitecaps, but they also kind of feel like the most obvious candidate for regression this year.
That's easily one of the largest sort of player storylines entering the season is Amanda Levier going to play or not? Like, it's definitely a bit of a Levier watch.
All right.
Toronto.
Finally. Yeah.
Going up north.
Alphabetically last, and maybe last in our hearts.
But, I mean, they are 6th, so.
They also part protagonist, part antagonist, because Digit Murphy's still there, just like patrolling with a scowl and hating transgendered folks. So in the offseason, Digit Murphy made most of the headlines for the Toronto Six, having put her name and face to the Women's Sports Policy Working Group and their transphobic agenda, which was, let's say, not great.
And never really sort of substantially disavowing that agenda, that group. She stepped back and was not officially a part of it, but never really said, I didn't believe in this. So pretty hard to, take her being for what we hope the league is for.
Yeah. In an interview with DF Pendries, they were given multiple opportunities to say, I am not transphobic, and never said I am not transphobic.
Mm-hmm.
They just were like, oh, I just put my name on it and didn't really do a lot of research, but just say it's awful and move forward. Okay, I'm getting a little aggressive about the Toronto Six. Anyways.
Well, that's something we've covered before, and, one of the sort of sticking points in the league. And so, when given an opportunity, yeah, she doubled down and didn't disavow this group. And hopefully that becomes a nothing. We would love if that just receded in the background and the hockey took the center stage.
I would love if this season happened and then at the end, Digit Murphy just kind of unceremoniously left the league.
Mm-hmm.
And because we're not going to get a retraction. We're not going to get oh my gosh, that was horrible. I'm not a transphobe. We're not going to get that. We know that. That's not going to happen.
Right.
But if they just quietly left, cool. To Toronto's credit, Digit is no longer kind of the face of the franchise. They're not the coach.
She's kicked upstairs, if you will.
Well, she was already the president, so she relinquished her title as head coach. That title is now owned by Mark Jocelyn, who had most recently spent 4 seasons coaching the Toronto Patriots in the Ontario Junior Hockey League. Had also been the GM there. And the bigger acquisition, name-wise at least, Hall of Famer Angela James is the assistant coach for this team, which is a coup on many levels.
That is men's hockey Hall of Famer Angela James. Like she is in, or not men's hockey, but like she is in.
Let's just start that over.
Sorry, yeah, that is all of hockey Hall of Famer Angela James. Like she's one of the names of any woman in hockey in general, in all of hockey.
She is hands down one of the best female hockey players of all time. Well, let me restate this. She is like one of the best hockey players of all time. One of the most recognizable women's hockey players in the history of the game. And she's just hanging out coaching folks in Toronto.
Yeah. One of the few players along with Men on Rum to like get a lot of press hockey worldwide.
So, Toronto set out this offseason to kind of like retain what worked in their inaugural season. And so they did that. They re-signed Michaela Grant-Mentis, MGM MVP Michaela Grant-Mentis. They also re-signed Cheyenne Darkangelo, their captain, their goalie Elaine Chuli, Emma Woods, Emma Greco, Lindsay Eastwood. They brought in Soraya Tinker, which was a great move, bringing her home, bringing the Toronto native home. So they did a great job of re-signing their established talent, especially those backline folks in Emma Greco and Lindsay Eastwood. They also they drafted 8 players in this year's draft, including having the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 9th, and 10th overall picks, which is kind of absurd.
The Arizona Coyotes strategy?
For next year, yeah. The exact opposite of the 2021 draft Coyotes strategy.
Right. We're just going to hoard picks.
Yeah. They have like 13 in the first 3 rounds next year.
I love it. I mean, if you're going to go from bad to good, that's how you do it.
Exactly. So Megan Bears, who they took 3rd, is going to be the most high profile of these draft choices. The person they took 4th overall had already committed to play in Austria, so is gone.
I am sorry.
Yeah.
I have to go.
They actually played for Ohio State, so I'm going to guess that accent is a little off. What accent breathes through its mouth the most?
I refuse to do an Ohio State accent.
Fuck Ohio. They added Taylor Davison, which was a great addition in the draft, and also Annie McDonald. Those folks have already been signed and should add a lot of depth and snarl and progressive puck moving attitude to the team. Most importantly, however, they added Michaela Cava to a forward core that is incredibly fast, incredibly skilled. They scored the most goals in the Wubble, and Michaela Cava crushed it in Sweden the last couple of years and is another one of those transplants who should have a major impact on the PHF this season.
This is going to be one of these teams that like beats you in a track meet.
They are Edmonton.
6-5
every night.
8-7.
If you ask me, Jake, what team are you going to watch every game of outside of the Connecticut Whale? The answer is the Toronto 6.
It's going to be Toronto score 6 goals to win.
Yeah, it's going to be so much fun. Let's not discredit Elaine Chuli, very good goaltender in their right, but
not at all.
Yeah, they are an offensive team who is going to play a progressive style of hockey that blows the doors off of a lot of teams, and it's going to be great.
Yeah, on paper, it's like, oh, yeah. They're going to score a lot.
Yeah. All right. That's our kind of like
team by team
previews. Some predictions for the looming PHF season 7. The Pride got better.
It's hard to believe, but yeah, they did.
I think obviously losing Teresa Vanasova and Lexi Lang is a huge loss. Great centers make teams, and Lexi Lang was probably one of the most underrated players in the league because they were the second line center in Boston behind Jillian Dempsey. She's playing her trade elsewhere this year. However, Boston's so stacked.
Yeah, I mean, they replaced all of those 3 players with
good
equally
players.
good as, or maybe, could even represent upgrades in, Friesen, Russ, and Boulier. Like, yeah, a huge coup. Rich got richer again. Hate to see it, but respect the grind.
Yeah. On top of that, they brought in Katie Burt, who is an incredible goaltender. Just in case Lavisa Sealander goes to the Olympics this year, they were like, we'll bring in her. Oh, who is she? Yeah, she's really fucking awesome.
Well, and what we've seen in the NHL is backup goaltenders bring you really far. Your backup goaltender is almost as important as your 2C, and we've hit that nail on the head many, many times.
Yeah, absolutely. This team is absolutely loaded. Their closest competitor from the last 2 years, Minnesota, appears to have kind of taken a step back. So, at least on paper.
Yeah, the proof will definitely be in the pudding with respect to Minnesota. I mean,
the fish pads.
When they play a game, if Amanda Levier's there, and if they do well, like, standing pat will look like a decent strategy. But in the offseason, when you're kind of looking for movement and looking for, refreshes of players and, maybe get hoodwinked by like the Blackhawks additions of players that suck, we'll see when the pucks start flying.
Right. But since this is a preview and this is all on paper.
Correct.
Minnesota appears to have taken a step back. The other 4 teams in the league are kind of unknowns. Boston seems to have gotten better. And so no team seems prepared to kind of take advantage of the opportunities of a new season like Boston is.
Yeah, correct. I would say if there's a team that is most primed to kind of take a step forward, it's Connecticut. That addition, I mean, their additions and their moves seem the most convincing of the teams that didn't win the championship last year.
I agree, because the Whale are the best. I also think one of the storylines or one of the kind of predictions of this year is that newcomers are going to feast on this league. We talked about Kennedy Marchment and Michaela Kava earlier. However, there's a bunch of players who have come into the league in this draft. We got Taylor Gerard coming in. But there's also a bunch of young players. I'm thinking of like Emma Vlasic, Soraya Tinker, Sammy Davis, who are young but now experienced and have the ability to kind of take that next step with leadership positions on their teams. And so I think season 7 is going to be not so much about the established stars. They're still going to be there. Jillian Dempsey's still incredible, and she's going to hit 100 points this year, and it's going to be a worthy celebration. 100 points for her career, not 100 points in 20 games. That would be absurd. But
I mean, would love to see it if it happened.
Yeah. But I think this year is the year that the league kind of turns over a little bit into like the next phase of its stardom, and we start to see a bunch of the names we talked about earlier really kind of establish themselves as the new wave, as this like the next punch of skill that's in the PHF. It's going to be really cool to watch.
I'm really interested in this huge crew of rookies that Buffalo is going to play. It's like meeting new friends. At least one or two of them are going to be stars. You have 12 rookies,
or 12 new players, but yeah. We're just gonna throw it out there. We're gonna get wild here. Not Minnesota wild. Evan might get a little Minnesota wild.
Oh yeah.
We're gonna talk about standing. We're just the end of season predictions. We're not gonna forecast Isabel Cup champions. We're not gonna forecast who makes the playoffs. What we're gonna just say is this is our projected standings at the end of the year.
Okay.
End of the regular season. I'll go first. Mine might be looking over Evans for the first time. Mine might be a little less controversial than Evans.
Well, I go for. I mean, I think my predictions are more like will It's more like I want this to happen.
You love fucking with me too. So
Yeah, and also if you put together like a very, button up suit and tie, like official prediction, I'm like, yeah, I'm just going to shit post.
I'll do largely chalk of the top. I think Boston and Toronto are the top two teams. Toronto made some great additions. Boston is Boston. Boston is at this point Tampa, where like they're the best team unless you prove them otherwise. And we've seen Tampa kind of sputter out of the gate, but figure it out, even minus Nikita Kucherov. And I think that we might see a little bit of a regression first off as Boston introduces new players. But by the end of the season, they're number one. Toronto is going to be a mainstay in the top. I think Buffalo, with their new players, I think they figure it out. We talked earlier about how Nate Oliver brought in all of these players early on to allow them the chance to become a cohesive unit and to gel. They've played a couple of preseason games and they've been dominant. And Carly Jackson is unreal. So I have Buffalo at 3. I have my beloved Whale at 4, and I almost put them above Buffalo. And honestly, I think the offensive firepower in Connecticut could actually usurp maybe even Toronto in the rankings. But to be safe, I put Connecticut at 4. I think Minnesota takes a big step back. Not as big of a step back as they could. I think they're number 5, and I think the Rivs are number 6.
So going with my list, very different, just to be different. I think Minnesota finishes on top. I think standing pat shows to be a solid strategy, and they beat out their longtime rival Boston to get the accolades that I'm hoping they get. Connecticut, as you pointed out, is going to be a scoring machine, and so I think that they finish 3rd. How do I have Connecticut ranked higher than you do? Maybe that's just realism versus realism and analysis versus shit posting. I
didn't say that Connecticut wasn't going to win the Isabel Cup. I just said I think they're going to take 4th in the regular season.
Oh, I see. We're talking regular season.
Yeah,
okay, well, whatever. Yeah, behind them I have Toronto, who has a lot of new faces, might kind of struggle early in the season. Buffalo, who has been a work in progress and will kind of continue to be a work in progress, even though they will probably get better. And then I have the Rivs last, as you do.
The only thing we agree on is that the Rivs deserve... I mean, the Rivs will be last. All right. And finally, we've done this in our NHL season preview for, I want to say, the last 2 years, but it's only been like 8 months because we've gotten to do 2 NHL season previews in that time. MGO blog, which is a University of Michigan football blog, does a 3 opportunities for us to look stupid.
And boy, do we take those opportunities.
Like just hand in hand down the street, singing a merry tune. So this is 3 opportunities for us to look stupid for this PHF season. First off, newcomers Kennedy Marchment and Michaela Kava will battle it out for the points lead and MVP honors. I'm going to say Michaela Kava wins it because she is playing with a more up-tempo team in Toronto, who will, as we talked about earlier, probably score like 5 to 6 goals a game. I think Michaela gets to 24 points in 20 games, which would be unreal. And I think that's enough for the scoring title and MVP honors, just edging out Kennedy Marchment. And as a dark horse, but maybe not so much a dark horse, Sammy Davis.
I'm thinking Amanda Levier does in fact come in back and play for Minnesota. And she is the catalyst that leads them to a very good season. I think she barely edges out Sealander to be the best goalie in the league. Probably Carly Jackson right behind them. And I think Minnesota, defies the off-season lack of hype and forms a really good team.
I am going to suggest that you are slightly wrong, and that I think Carly Jackson is going to have the best goals against average and save percentage in the league this season, and steals multiple games for Buffalo, who very greatly improves on last season's performance.
I love how you lay out like specific metrics in there that we can like go back and look at.
Yeah, I like being proven wrong, so this is fun.
Well, also take some courage to put that on the board. Like, I love it.
I don't have any pride, so it helps.
Do you have any Boston pride?
I don't. I think Buffalo in general, the youth and the big roster churn means that they don't fully gel this season. So they're not a championship caliber team yet, but I think they're much better. And I think they make the playoffs, but I think Carly Jackson has one hell of a season.
So early Buffalo Renaissance, not late Buffalo Renaissance.
Yeah. Another stupid prediction. I think at some point, a commentator on ESPN Plus openly questions and criticizes the efficacy of the new PHF trans inclusion policy.
Wow.
I think this sets off a firestorm. I think it'll be awesome. I think we will report on it. But I think they probably get a cease and desist order both from the league and from ESPN because ESPN hates it when their folks have opinions outside of Stephen A. Smith.
His opinions are written for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's kind of an inevitability that this happens. I think that caused enough of a firestorm, and I'm just like hoping that a couple of the folks who are going to call these PHF games will educate themselves enough on the league to know that this happened and just address it in some way during a game. I'm hoping it's like a Boston, Connecticut shootout where in like the middle of the second period, the commentator goes, by the way, and like Evan and I's ears go, what? And,
hello.
And so I think that happens at some point. I think much like we've seen journalists like Rick Westhead and Katie Strang, who follow the NHL beat, kind of beat the drum for this bringing up constantly the sexual harassment issue with the Chicago Blackhawks. I think this issue on the PHF side is very important, and I think somebody against the will of their employer brings it up this season.
That's a bold prediction, Cotton, and I am here for it. I don't have a similarly equal bold prediction. I think that there will be a lot of really exciting hockey played, and we will be sucked into ESPN Plus and here for as much of it as we can be. Yeah, I would love if this trans inclusion policy got a little bit more of sanitation by sunlight, and we talked more about it. I think that would be a big movement in the course of the season.
I think we stated this once, and we'll state it again. The season starts this weekend, November 6th. All teams are playing Saturday and Sunday. They play weekend games. You probably don't have anything better going on, so tune into ESPN Plus and check out some women's hockey. It turns out you'll probably fall in love with it because it's an incredibly skilled and fast-paced and energetic game. It's different from the NHL in that, you know, that you don't have the Tom Wilson kind of like stupid masculinity bullshit that goes involved.
Yeah, it's not unphysical. There's definitely still hitting.
Oh, absolutely.
But there's a little bit less of the like kind of dipshit masculinity that we kind of deal with in the NHL for sure.
And in a way, I think it makes the PHF more watchable than the NHL sometimes. And so check it out. To anybody listening to this, check it out. It's so much fun. There's a great vibe to the league. It really kind of just like hits on all of those. This is kind of what I feel like hockey should be kind of vibes.
Yeah, it does. It does in some ways feel very pure.
Yeah.
It's really competitive sports in a professional context, brought to you largely by the dedication and passion of the people involved. A lot of these people go through a lot to play this game and make sacrifices, both personal and professional, for long hours to bring us this very exciting product. So we're fully here for it. We only hope that they can get better and better paid so that the product gets better, more exciting, and more professional. But this is a super exciting league to watch and be a part of. It sort of feels like you're getting in on the ground floor, and it's going to just go bonkers from here. I'm excited for this new season, and one of the things that makes it super fun is like following these players on Twitter. A lot of them are super funny on Twitter. You can see Mallory Sliotis' cats. The Packers are both hilarious and very prescient on Twitter with their kind of addressing, you know, some of the issues around hockey in the league. And Soraya Tinker is
a juggernaut.
Yeah, just amazing. So, you know, the personalities, I think, are one of the things that brings me in as a viewer. And I'm really looking forward to seeing them play hockey and not be on Twitter. Like, I want to see some pucks flying. I want to see some hits. I want to see some awesome goals. And we know we're going to get that. We're excited to get that. And really looking forward to this season.
Yeah, if you watch the NHL, you'll notice that none of the players have personalities except for like Robin Lehner and the
David
Kachucks
Pastrnak.
and David Pastrnak. God, David Pastrnak is beautiful. He's wonderful. It's very seldom that you see an NHL player with a personality, and a lot of that is because they're following the same script, and it's like Gary Bettman's script, and it's lame and boring. And
none of the NHL personalities are as outspoken or as authentic as any of the PHF personalities.
So if you like hockey, if you think hockey is cool, if you have smelled a hockey arena and thought it was wonderful, check out some PHF hockey this weekend, November 6th and 7th on ESPN Plus. You all know you've got it because you're all streaming NHL games. Check it out. Give it a shot. We can't recommend it enough. It just feels like one of the like most beautiful elements of hockey that is out there, the sport that we all love.
Yeah, that's one of the things that makes this ESPN move so great. It's like, oh, you like hockey? Oh, there's just more hockey right here. You can just jump over from this hockey to that hockey. And, the more you learn about it, the more enjoyable it becomes. I think you have a final prediction.
Oh, yes. Zambonis. We will have them.
Lots of them.
And if we don't, burn the PHF to the ground. No, I'm just kidding.
The PHF Zamboni watch is hilarious.
Zamboni watch is where it's at, folks. And with that, thank you so much for listening. This has been our Premier Hockey Federation preview. It's women's hockey at its finest, and dive in, enjoy yourselves. We are Handsome Hockey Podcast. You can find us all over the internets at handsomehockey.com is our website. Handsome Hockey Podcast on Instagram, where we post, mostly other people's shit, but occasionally our own. At Handsome Hockey on Twitter, where we post mostly other people's shit, but even more of our own. And you can connect with us if you want to email us at handsomehockeypod@gmail.com. We also have the Handsome Hockey Facebook page, where we post lots of memes, but also some serious stuff that, people should really be taking into account.
And obviously you're listening to us somewhere, but we are on Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Overcast, Red Circle, and YouTube.
And finally, watch some PHF, folks. It's so fun. Like, we can't stress that enough. It's just really fun. It's good hockey. It's creative and skilled and fast, and you're not going to be disappointed. Thank you so much for listening to us. Stay handsome, everybody.
Restez beau, tout le monde.